Okay, just trying to get this all set up here. Thank you for bearing with me. Okay, this is a presentation on the Waldo Canyon fire that happened in Colorado Springs in 2012. This was one of the biggest fire disasters in Colorado history. We'll talk a little bit about that today. The fire started June 23rd, 2012, about 4 miles northwest of Colorado Springs. It was a complex Type 1 incident. 29 square miles burned, 32,000 residents were evacuated, 346 homes were destroyed. There were over $453 million worth of insurance claims, and most tragically, 2 people were killed. This is a map just showing you where Waldo Canyon is in relationship to the city of Colorado Springs. The red dot there is the location of Holmes Junior High, which at one point was the incident command center for this fire. And interestingly, this is where I went to 7th grade. I did not know that when I picked this topic, but when I saw how close this fire was to places where I had used to live, it really added an element of realism for me. This is a list courtesy of the El Paso County Sheriff's Department with all of the events, and this is just to show you just how complicated this fire was and how many different pieces there were to this. The main events are as follows. On the 22nd, there was smoke reported, and this was investigated by the U.S. Forest Service. On the 23rd, there was a brush fire that had spread quickly to the ridges, and the United States Forest Service took control. Emergency Operations Center was activated. Air tankers were ordered, and about 70 fire trucks were deployed. On the 24th, Highway 24, which is the main route to and from Colorado Springs, was closed and evacuations were started. On the 25th, the fire spread to Queens Canyon and aircraft started dumping fire retardant. The 26th was a really important day. This was a hot, windy, dry day, and the fire really spread this day. It pushed into neighborhoods, and there were houses and other structures destroyed. By the 27th, 30,000 people had been evacuated, and Vandenberg Air Force Base hotshots arrived. On the 28th, a presidential disaster was declared, and on the 29th, President Obama, as well as Senators Bennett and Udall, visited the area. On the 1st, the fire was about 55% contained. A red flag warning continued, and most people had returned to their homes. This is a map just showing you the progression of the fire. The area in magenta is where the fire was on the 23rd, and the area in orange is where it spread to on June 24th. And the area in light gray is where it was on the 25th. And then you can really see this area in yellow, which is where it spread to on June 26th, and just how big that fire grew that day. The area in green is corresponds to where the fire was on June 27th and 28th. And then the purple, red, and blue areas, which are smaller areas there, correspond to the continued spread on June 29th, June 30th, and July 1st, respectively. This link here is to a video that was created by a private citizen. It's a time-lapse photo that also has some captions on it of the major fire events. It's pretty dramatic to watch. It's set to music and kind of really pretty haunting. This list here is courtesy of the City of Colorado Springs and just shows you all the different organizations that were involved in this fire. Just to give you an idea, it obviously involved a whole bunch of different folks. So, as noted on the previous slide, there were many organizations involved in the fire. There were organizations at the municipal, county, state, and federal level involved. But here I've listed the major players in this fire. There was the United States Forest Service, the El Paso County Sheriff's Office, Colorado Springs Fire Department, Colorado Springs Police Department, the El Paso County Wildland Fire Team, and the City of Colorado Springs. So let's just take a look now at the incident command system and some of the roles of public health. You know, the bulk of the work in this fire, of actually fighting fire, protecting property, evacuating people, et cetera, was done by experts such as the United States Forest Service and emergency responders such as fire and police department personnel. The El Paso County Public Health Department was kind of the main official public health entity involved, and it appropriately played a supportive role. However, there are, of course, many organizations, both governmental and non-governmental, that were involved in the public health response. So Basically, technically, the emergency support function number 8 within the National Response Framework specifies the federal response to supplement state, local, and tribal resources in meeting the medical and public health needs of disaster victims. And I got that from Landsman and Burke, 2017, on page 59. However, this also provides a really useful framework for us to look at the Waldo Canyon fire and how it was responded to on multiple levels. Here I've listed the core capabilities under ESF 8 as outlined by Landsman and Burke on pages 537 to 540. So the core capabilities are public information and warning, critical transportation, environmental response, health and safety, fatality management services, mass care services, logistics and supply chain management, and finally public health, healthcare, and emergency medical services. And we're going to take a look at some of these core capabilities and how they were met in the Waldo Canyon fire. So public information and warning was obviously really critical in this fire, and involved a lot of different people. The Joint Information Center was established by many different organizations on the first day of the fire, and the JISC provided information to the public through press conferences, websites, and social media. Additionally, sheriff's deputies went door to door, warning people and helping them evacuate as needed. The Sheriff's Office of Emergency Management of the City of Colorado Springs issued emergency warnings to the public, and the Public Information Officer set up non-emergent call center. After the fire, there were meetings that were organized to basically help people know about the dangers of post-fire flooding and mudslides, and the county IT department distributed educational handouts to people about these dangers as well during those meetings. So the El Paso County Public Health Department played obviously a really important role in public information and warning. The Public Health Department was actually had to be evacuated from their office pretty early on in the fire and had to quickly establish a temporary office. They took calls from the public. They continued to distribute WIC vouchers for people who needed infant formula. They provided regular air quality advisories because of the dangers of the smoke. This was really important. They educated the public about smoke exposure and extreme heat through several media, including their website, TV, radio, print media, and social media. After the fire was over, the El Paso County Public Health Department coordinated with other health departments from other counties, as well as the National Public Health Information Coalition, to educate the public about handling of ash and other debris and some of the health concerns related to that. So let's look at the strengths and weaknesses of how this core capability was met. One strength was that press conferences that included officials from El Paso County, the City of Colorado Springs, the State Forest Service, and the Type 1 Incident Command Team were established quickly, and they were held really consistently. Additionally, local media began streaming information pretty quickly, and social media was seen as a really valuable tool, and this was used by the JIC. There are several areas for improvement that are worth noting. There are a couple of JIC-specific issues. Notably, some of the staff in the JIC were not familiar with the ICS system, and this obviously led to a lot of confusion and problems with communication. Additionally, there was no specific manager that was designated at the JIC. The Public Health Information Officer did try to fill this role to some degree, but this obviously took him away from some of his main duties and was seen as a big problem. Additionally, there was some information to the public that was not conveyed as well as it could have been. Local media, though they started streaming information really quickly, they conveyed some inaccurate information just due to the volume of information they were dealing with, as well as some inaccurate reports that were coming in. Terms were not well defined to the public. For example, pre-evacuation, voluntary evacuation, and mandatory evacuation were not well defined, and the public just didn't know what to do, and this created a lot of confusion. The reverse 911 system had mixed results. It did work really quite smoothly for those people who had signed up. However, if people had not registered their cell phones, there was no way to reach them. As the fire progressed into Colorado Springs, cell service was often interrupted. And then, finally, while evacuations in most areas went pretty smoothly, the evacuation of the upper part of the Mountain Shadows neighborhood was really pretty disastrous. And many accounts state that residents were not warned in a timely manner or not even really warned at all. And this was partly due to the quickly shifting nature of the fire, but there seemed to be potentially a breakdown in the ICS communication system that happened during that time. Okay, let's look now at environmental response, health, and safety as our next core capability to look at. The Colorado Department of Corrections, the Kit Carson County, and the Colorado National Guard all helped maintain road and trail closures. And after the fire, the El Paso County Emergency Operations Center really took the lead on recovery work and preparation for post-fire flooding and mudslides. The Sheriff's Office Gateway Program, which is a program which helps people who are recently released from prison with reintegrating into society and avoiding recidivism. They filled 5,000 sandbags in preparation for flooding. And then there was a burned area emergency response team that was established. They quickly evaluated the burned area and then coordinated with multiple different organizations for emergency stabilization treatments in the area. So the bulk of the work in this area happens after the fire. The United States Forest Service and the Rocky Mountain Field Institute are continuing to monitor the stabilization and rehabilitation efforts, and evaluation of how that's going is a pretty complicated process. So as I said, the bulk of this work in this area is ongoing. One area that was noted for improvement is better use of volunteers. It was noted that law enforcement and fire personnel were often used as spotters in the field, which pulled them away from more critical duties. And there's a call for better trained volunteers in this area. So let's look now at the core capability of mass care services. This is obviously really important as there were so many people evacuated from their homes during this fire. So the Sheriff's Office and of Emergency Management in the City of Colorado Springs opened shelters, and additionally, chapters of the Red Cross opened shelters in Woodland Park, Cheyenne Mountain, and Palmer schools. Interestingly, there was a special needs shelter that was established, and this was specifically for people who'd been evacuated with special needs. The El Paso County and Colorado Springs Animal Response Team and the Humane Society all cooperated to shelter pets as well as large animals of the evacuated residents. And this was the first time that there had been a coordinated effort to shelter large animals in addition to household pets. So that provided some new challenges for the teams, of course. So overall, the provision of mass care services was seen as a real strength in this disaster. The staffing of these shelters was seen as adequate. The staff and volunteers were well trained and also adapted very well to the increasing magnitude of this emergency. The fire kept growing and growing, and people kept coming in, and it was generally thought that the staff adapted very well to those increased demands. One of the weaknesses was in the staffing of the large animal shelters. They relied on off-duty sheriff deputies, for example, to staff those. And as the fire continued, these people eventually had to go back to work. So there's a call for better trained volunteers to help with this if a disaster like this should happen in the future. Now we're going to look at the core capability of logistics and supply chain management. So this was a big fire, and there were a lot of organizations and individuals involved in meeting this core capability. Really too many to talk about here, but there were some areas for improvement that were noted. So first of all, food, supplies, and vendors needed to be better identified ahead of time so that time wasn't wasted in that process once the fire was started. There was a manual system of staff and volunteer check-in at the EOC that seemed to be pretty clunky and created some logistic issues. Importantly, public services personnel didn't have enough personal protective equipment to be able to do their jobs. So people who were, repairing electrical lines, et cetera, didn't have enough personal protective equipment to be able to do their jobs in a timely manner. And then there was just an insufficient supply of things like radio batteries, just because the fire was big. It went on for a long time. It is interesting to think about the logistics of storing that much equipment given how rare events like this are. And so, there was some discussion in the stuff I read that it might not be feasible to store that much equipment, and it might not be worth the cost. So looking now at the core capability of public health, healthcare, and emergency medical services, just due to the nature of the fire, the medical needs were kind of minimal. Routine healthcare was provided at shelters, and hospitals were put on alert for increased staffing needs, but it was generally felt that they were able to handle the slightly increased volumes that they saw. As noted above, the El Paso County Public Health Department took a very active role in educating the public about health needs and where to seek health care, focusing on respiratory concerns as well as the dangers of exposure to extreme heat. El Paso County also established a disaster recovery center, and this was to help evacuees and others affected by the fire. And at this center, they had resources from multiple government and nonprofit organizations, and it was kind of a one-stop shopping place where people could go to get help with all kinds of needs. Finally, the City of Colorado Springs established the Waldo Canyon Fire Recovery Task Force, and they provided a resource guide which had information on quite a lot of different things, from rebuilding your house to health information. So that was a good resource. So overall, the core capability of public health, healthcare, and emergency medical services was thought to be well met. The Disaster Recovery Center was well staffed and helpful, and there was generally thought to be really good coordination among various organizations. There are a couple of important factors that affected the overall management of the fire and therefore the public health response. These don't neatly fit into any of the ESF8 core capabilities, but I think they bear mentioning. There's a note that the communication among the agencies was not always streamlined through incident command. And what this really affected most notably was evacuations. And again, that particularly in the Upper Mountain Shadows neighborhood, it was thought that some of this communication breakdown really led to unnecessary loss of property and the lives of 2 people. And again, it wasn't potentially just not the communication that was broken down, but the whole ICS structure seemed to fall apart a little bit, at least in regards to the management of this neighborhood. So luckily, at least some of the communities that were involved in this fire had taken some steps prior to the fire that helped mitigate some of the damage. The Colorado Springs Fire Department had started their wildfire mitigation program in 2001. Part of this program was a Sharing the Responsibility campaign, and this sought to reach out and educate citizens about their roles in management of a wildfire, and this was thought to have been really helpful. The wildfire mitigation program also did planning. They strengthened building codes, educated people about fuels management, and did grant administration. There were also wildfire evacuation drills that were conducted in 2011 in the city of Colorado Springs. And community members underwent training 4 times a year, and there were many copies of an emergency preparedness safety guide distributed. A couple of notable recommendations for change made by the City of Colorado Springs. First of all, develop additional methods to deliver community preparedness training and messaging throughout the community to reach a broad and diverse audience. And secondly, utilize community volunteers to develop and conduct community preparation activities. These really are pretty broad recommendations, but I think would do a lot to help with community preparedness and resilience. There have been some positive concrete changes that have been made since the fire. Evacuation types have been well defined and the public has been educated. the need to educate citizens about reverse 911 has been identified, as has the need for additional vehicles, portable radios, and batteries. I'm not sure how much improvement has actually been made, but at least folks have identified these as priorities. And the Wildlands Fire Mitigation Program has also instituted some new programs. They have strengthened construction ordinances, and then they also have a stipend program for people living in high-risk areas. This provides dollar-for-dollar matching for people if they improve their homes to make them more fire resistant. I think the big thing that is really needed is really more training in the ICS system, both among government and non-government organizations, but also just volunteers and general citizens. So, ultimately, the ICS and community resilience are about saving property and lives. This is a little information from the Denver Post on the 2 people who lost their lives in this fire. It's felt by many that this tragedy could have been averted if there had been a little bit better preparation and more coherence to the ICS system. So following are some of my references, and that's it. Thank you.